Go.
Alright, good evening everyone. So today on this fine, cold, rainy evening, we're going to talk about the fine components of visual design. So who here thinks this is a great slide? Alright. Now who here thinks this is a good slide? Alright, that's right. Yeah, so today we're going to just talk about, again, the five components of visual design. So I, Shelley.
Matthew Mitchell.
Brenda Clicka.
I'm Yamaneisha.
Ronnie Naring.
Miguel Herrera.
We'll take you on a brief journey on the tour of how cameras have evolved over time. So to briefly touch up what we're going to talk about, we're going to learn how to adapt our slides to our audience, making yourself the visual, designing a consistent template, identifying what the audience sees, and using animation to clarify your presentation. So also you guys should see a handout in front of you with a blue border. So make sure you pay attention to our presentation, because that's going to be our activity that's throughout our presentation. And also we will have a video, so it's a fun little agonizing video. And we will recap and then also have Q&A afterwards. So now I'm going to pass it on to Amir, who's going to talk about adapting your audience.
Thanks, Julie. Camera obscura is a natural optical phenomenon that occurs when an image of a scene at the other side of the screen is projected through a small hole in the screen as a reversed and inverted image on a surface opposite to the plane. So, to adapt the content to your audience, you need to know your audience in advance. You must adapt your content before the presentation. Why is it important to adapt your content to the audience? It's important to know things such as who is your audience, what they know from your presentation, and what they expect from you at the presentation, as the team once said. The more information you will have about your audience, the easier you will be able to adapt your content to them. If you want to be understood, you need to understand them before. Even if something seems easy to understand for you, it's not necessarily the same for the people in front of you. The content is more efficient when people understand everything and when the presentation is clear. To adapt the content is probably one of the most important things in the presentation. It's also easier for you to grab attention when you know how to stimulate your audience. So now, how you can do that? You have to do some research about the audience before. You can make a survey and send it to your audience before. Like that, you will know more information about them, and it will be easier to adapt your content and your visual. It's what our team did a few weeks ago, and thanks to that, we knew that your three favorite colors are blue, black, and gray. It's why we are using blue in our presentation. You can use terminology that they know. You can, for example, use words and expressions they know. Storytelling, they can identify themselves on it. And something important is you have to know the meaning of colors. Each color means something. Blue is associated with peace, water, and variability. It's a calming mind color that provides a sense of tranquility, space, and security. Red creates a sense of urgency. It provides excitement, energy, and passion. Red stimulates the body, affecting nerve impulse and raising blood pressure. Green is the color of health, nature, and tranquility. This color is used to relax people. An example, Starbucks uses this color because they want you to be calm and relaxed when you're drinking your coffee. Yellow and orange are the color of optimism and cheerfulness because they are the color of sun. It also stimulates the logic center of the brain. By the way, yellow is a good color to grab attention. So it can help you a lot to know, to understand, and to use the meaning of color for your presentation. It's really useful if you want to adapt your content to a situation or if you want to create a certain atmosphere. So now I will tell you some mistakes that you can avoid. Don't use not adapted words. If you're speaking to an audience, be sure that they can understand everything you say, especially if you want to use a special vocabulary like medical words. If they don't understand, it will be just like if you speak another language. An example, levez la main ceux qui comprennent ce que je dis à l'instant même. You cannot understand because it's French, it's another language. So it's why you have to adapt your content. It's the same for people in front of you. Don't use not don't use not adapted colors. If you want to grab attention and put some life into your presentation, don't use colors such as black, gray, or white. But be careful. The meaning of color can change according to a country or a culture. An example, in Middle West, orange is the color of death. In Egypt, in some South American countries, the color of death is yellow. Even if it seems idiot, the way that your audience see a color can really affect how they will react to your presentation. And finally, don't stereotype too much. If you're presenting something to a group of women, don't use pink just because the audience is full of women. Don't use basic design or easy words because your audience is high school student. They might feel insulted. The secret is to adapt enough, but not too much. This picture was took with the camera obscura. As you can see, the image is inverted. To coexist, camera developer has adapted the camera to the consumer. Now, Matthew will present to you, make yourself the visual.
Thank you, Amir. So, here we have make yourself the visual. Give a visual break. In many presentations, there will be charts, graphs, and data which can become overwhelming to the audience very quickly. Therefore, you can engage the audience directly. It's beneficial because you're able to ask feedback and give questions on the data or by further explaining the information previously discussed. You can also fix the flow. Perhaps your presentation has become scattered or unorganized, and your next point just doesn't quite fit with what you're about to talk about. In this case, you can move to a black slide. Doing so can prove helpful by forcing the audience's attention towards yourself. And you can create a connection necessary for your next point. Adding emphasis. Your visual presentation is the framework of your entire point, but in most circumstances, your audience will take away only the information that was made personal to them. So you can throw out your deck by reinforcing your information with a personal story. Doing so gives your audience takeaways necessary for a better understanding and also builds trust in what you're presenting. Oh, some common mistakes. Dumping information. When a presentation contains a ton of visual information, it's best to break away from those visuals. Adding a visual break helps reinforce your information, and the audience ends up leaving with valuable stories associated with your points. Oh. Jumping off topic. It happens to all of us, and it's easy to do when moving from topic to topic. But instead of jumping directly to your next point, it may be best to move to a black slide, allowing yourself some time to establish a transition that makes sense for your audience. And failing to give eye contact. When engaging your audience in hopes of adding emphasis to your topics, make sure to give proper eye contact. Gaining the audience interest in selling your ideas requires trust, which cannot be accomplished without looking away from them. Here we have a picture that was actually taken by the Polaroid Model 95. What's interesting about this camera is it's all about making yourself the visual, because it's the first camera with an instant picture. It actually creates it just like the Polaroids that you know from like the 80s. Making yourself the visual. What's cool about that is connecting with your audience. So in my line of work, I sell products like phones, which have plans that make the phones work. And so I find it useful to connect with my customers, because without selling the phones, with giving proper eye contact, I can't make the sale. And Ronnie will cover designing a basic template.
Thank you, Matthew. So now we arrive at SLR cameras. SLR cameras use film to record images for development. And like film, once you develop your visuals, you will have a product that will attract the audience to your presentation. So now I'm going to teach you how to design a basic and consistent template. So the best way to do this is to use Slide Master in PowerPoint. And when should you do this? You should do this when you are adapting your presentation to the audience. It's better to design your own template because pre-designed templates have visuals that can be too distracting. Rather than picking a color scheme that is pre-made and generic, you want to create a color scheme that the audience will be drawn to. So let me ask you this, how many of you guys know how to use Slide Master already? Nobody? Seriously? Okay. All right, that's okay. So this handout that I passed out to you guys will actually show you how to do it. It's 4 easy steps on how to use SlideMaster, and will work with any version of PowerPoint 2007 and above. So let's get to it. First, you open up PowerPoint and you go to the View tab on the ribbon. Next, you find the Master Views group and you click SlideMaster. Once you do that, you will see different layout and themes that pop up, and you can choose which theme you want to create your template with. Lastly, you will use the audience data to customize color schemes, fonts, and background color. So now, let me tell you about some common mistakes. So first, we have using visuals that are too distracting to your audience and may not be important to your theme. Your visuals need to reinforce the structure of your presentation. Next, using colors that are irrelevant, that are not positively associated with the audience, and does not reflect any aspect of their personality or their interests. And lastly, ignoring the distance between the audience and the screen. The further away that you sit from the screen, the less likely you are to see the bottom half of the slides. So now let's apply what we've learned. We chose the evolution of cameras as our theme because photography is a visual medium, and we are here to teach you about designing your visuals. Our slides have colors that we found to be the most popular among our audience. Our fonts are consistent with being easy to read, and our background is a solid color, and our theme eliminates white space to create a more pleasing aesthetic. As you can see from this picture here, as we progress through the cameras, the level of detail in the pictures increases, and colors are now present. So now, I will pass it off to Brenda, who will tell you a little bit more about identifying what your audience needs to see.
Thank you, Ronnie. So now we're going to talk about identifying what the audience needs to see. Most people rank public speaking high on the list of things they don't like to do, according to Robert Blaine's article, Giving Memorable Presentations. However, everyone in this room knows it's unavoidable. So after you research your audience, that's what you would, Team 4 spoke about it in depth, about how to research, about researching. But it's important to have collected all the facts. After research, you need to find the most important tool in your toolbook. Visuals. So visuals help the audience focus. We also need to engage the audience. According to a study by the Waldron School, the use of visuals results in a greater percentage of the audience in speaking being on the same page. Not only that, but you will be perceived as more professional, more interesting, and better prepared. Now, whether the subject makes for an interesting talk or a boring one depends on the style of the speaker and the content. Let's move on to how. Create titles that clarify your topic. The titles of your slides give you a roadmap for what you want to discuss. Along with the titles, that's when you introduce your color scheme and visuals used on later slides, as we've done here. When creating your titles, you want to be brief, concise, and to the point. Just an example of implementing this is, instead of using experience versus sales, you want to have a title that says, Experienced Brokers Sold More Bonds. You want your visuals to make sense even when you're not there to explain them. You need to create standalone sense, some things that can aid the audience and the presenter are preparing the audience with an overview of everything. You definitely want to reinforce the structure with the preview slide like we did, that Shelly did at the beginning of our presentation. With this, you need to make sure it sticks out. Let's move on to common mistakes. Visuals are an enhancement, not a crutch. We shouldn't rely on the PowerPoint. And lastly, avoid audience engagement. Also, I want to speak to you about our picture here. So with the DSLR camera, it's also known as the digital camera, you can control what the audience sees. As you can see, the focus is on the railroad here and not the background. Now let's bring our focus to the activity that we've handed out to everybody. I will go over briefly the fill in the blanks. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel your visual stood out on the last or current presentation? Also, I have 2 more questions. Using what you learned today, how can you elevate your presentation's visuals? And then the final question, thinking about your next presentation, create titles for the slides that clarify your topic. I'll give you 3 minutes to complete this assignment. You can talk in your groups or you can do it individually.
Don't use the same time. We're not supposed to.
Yes, if you have a comment for no, this is how we can improve our presentation. You guys have approximately 30 seconds left, so go ahead and wrap up. Your final thoughts. No, this is mandatory. This is how you order it, right? No, you have to. This is part of your group. You have to evaluate the group that's presented.
Okay, guys. So I wanted to see, for the second question, if anyone would like to volunteer what they wrote down. Using what you learned today, how can you elevate your next presentation's visuals? Does anyone want to? Okay.
So I like the use of colors, so I thought that maybe we could eliminate white space with using our visuals and different colors.
Yeah, exactly. Great. I think Ronnie spoke about that, so that's great that you're implementing that. So now I will bring it over to Miguel, who will talk about animate to clarify your slides.
Thank you, Brenda. Now, I'm pretty sure each of us have a smartphone, and pretty much moving in the evolution of photography, whether it's an Android or an iPhone, everyone has a camera within reach. With that, there are certain degrees of setbacks that have been with lenses, but the capability of having it all with you all the time is a good offset. Now, animation is defined as a technique of using successive images in a sequence to create the illusion of movement. And according to Mayer and Morin, in their journal article, video is excluded from the definition as video shows the motion of real objects. And when you want animation, it focuses on the simulated movement of items. So with animation, to clarify your slides, when you want to go ahead and use it is when you're simplifying complex charts. Rather than throwing the information all at once to your audience, we'll cover it more in depth on the how of simplifying those complex charts. Another time you want to go ahead and use animation is to control the flow of information. Determining what a person sees, as Brenda had spoken before, is really important in being able to dictate the story you're telling within your presentation. And enhancing key points, drawing the audience's attention to the key points that you deem the most important is a perfect use of animation. As I was saying, how? Simplifying complex charts. You want to be able to build up your items. Build it by a base. Build your base information over and then simply add in a sequence additional information. It allows your audience time to process the information and grasp the information you're trying to tell. being able to dim your text and make your text appear when you want it. It flows in with the controlling the flow of your information. You identify which pieces need to go within that sequence and which items are the most important. In addition, presenting ideas through visual media, through animated media or the use of animated infographics, which is a key item being purely off infographics, purely off the visual, you can tell a story without using any words. Now, some mistakes that people tend to use when they're using animation to clarify their slides are overloading their slides. Like in film photography, if you use too much light and overexpose your picture, your item that you're trying to focus on is not going to be viewable. Being inconsistent with your animations, it's a major deal. We hark on being consistent with your presentation, be it your text, your colors, the way you flow. Consistency is key within your presentation. And using distracting transitions. There's no reason to use transitions within a major presentation. It just takes away and distracts, whether it's fly-in, star wipes, dissolving effects. It's not necessary. Now, the following video, which I'll be presenting to you, have some of these common mistakes. There are 4 mistakes. I suggest take a breather because it might be a little infuriating, the following mistakes you'll be seeing. Now, as you watch this video, go ahead and jot down a note of which of the effects infuriate you the most, that causes the greatest reaction and weakest reactions, and your reasoning behind those responses. I'll be asking questions based on that. Now, from what we've seen from the video, do we have any volunteers who want to volunteer their opinion? All right, go ahead.
Wait, which is the opinion? Which one's the worst one?
Which, in your opinion, yes, which one caused you the strongest reaction?
So the steps 1 through 5, but the last one where they were all different. Terrible.
All right, go ahead.
Oh, the same thing. I have OCD and none of those matched.
Yes.
So the final mistake, the words appearing at once. Okay. That can be amplified also with if you include audio for each of those steps as it appears. That can be another effect that is a big mistake. You don't want to present within your presentation. Now, the following image was taken from an iPhone, and it shows another example of a mistake you don't necessarily want to have within your presentation. Can anyone tell me where you want to focus on this picture? It's so busy, there's so many things going on, you can't really focus on the key point. And that's what you want to take away with using animation. You just want to be able to key in on what you want and not overwhelm your audience. Now that we've covered when you want to use animations, when are some mistakes, and given some examples of them, I'll go ahead and hand it off to Shelley. We'll be covering our recap.
Thank you, Miguel. Now, just to cover over what we went over, we learned how we adapt our slides to our audience. We also went over how you make yourself the visual with our little blank slide by Matthew. We learned how you design a consistent template, which Ronnie gave you a little handout so you can take home. We also identified what the audience sees, which Brenda went over. And then Miguel showed us how we animate our slides to clarify. So is there any questions?
They're wanting me to ask a question. I like the presentation. I like also how you guys took advantage of the feedback from presenters before. The theme that you guys selected, is that a reason that you selected that for? You were trying to show the history of the cameras, the photographic, what it was. What was it?
So well, we selected the cameras because we're trying to take you on a journey and see how the development of cameras also affects the development of your visuals.
I completely agree with you what you said about the transitions. Depending on the theme, is there ever an occasion where a transition could add to the presentation?
What you stated was, will there ever be a reason or a situation where transitions would be adequate? It would be deemed with your audience. If it's possibly a younger crowd who needs that little oomph to keep their attention, possibly. But if you are going to use transition animation, keep it as simple as possible and keep it consistent. Any other questions? Go ahead.
When you use animation, should you just animate your points, or should you animate like a subtitle or the pictures, or?
Well, what he said as, should you animate subtitles or just key items within your presentation? I say keep it to just your key items that you want to bring attention to. Your major titles will be there. That should be automatic. It should be present according to your agenda. So you just want to pop in those individual key points that you want to go ahead and animate. That way it limits the amount of animation that you have to use.